And welcome back to this web extra for Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. We're continuing our discussion about the Occupy movement in Idaho. With me, I have several guests. Anthony is a recent Idahoan who has moved to New York City to take part in Occupy Wall Street. Siobhan is a member of Occupy Boise. In Moscow, Idaho, we have Reggie Holmquist, who's a member of Occupy Moscow, Idaho. And in Pocatello, we have two members of the Occupy movement, Kay Finley from Occupy Idaho Falls and Christopher Cook of Occupy Pocatello. So we've got phone calls still holding on the line, and I'd like to go to them first. Let's take a call from Mike in Coeur d'Alene. Mike, go ahead, please.
Hey, my phone's probably going to die soon, but I want to make it real quick. I just want to say that I think a lot of people are frustrated with what's going on, and I think it comes down to that our country has gotten away from what it was supposed to be, and I think it's moved towards fascism, and I just kind of want to know what everyone else thought about that.
Okay, I'll put you on hold so you can hear, and hopefully your phone won't die so you can hear the answer. Siobhan?
Hi, Mike. I actually, your question kind of ties into the previous comment that was made that I really wanted to respond to, and that's that fascism is an interesting thing. I really think it's interesting, for example, that we get angry at people for vandalizing private property, but we don't get angry when we see that human beings are being treated as worse than property by being made homeless, for instance, or by going hungry. And so the fact to me that we value private property more than our fellow human beings certainly indicates something akin to fascism to me.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'd like to weigh on that. I don't necessarily believe that everything goes ahead and lend itself to fascism. We have community groups that are out there all across the country, and other community groups that are taking their public space back, that are expressing themselves, utilizing the First Amendment despite arrest activities. It's really empowering to see, and like in not all of these cases, you see confrontations like Occupy Oakland, or maybe even some places in New York, but in some places you actually have police officers who are willing to go ahead and help out whoever's down there. So I wouldn't say it's everything, but then if you want to talk about distribution of inequalities, I think we have to realize that that power isn't part of just a pure governmental line. It also includes other corporations as well that are buying our politicians.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, for calling in. I'm going to talk to Weston in Pocatello next. Weston, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question relates back to earlier in the conversation with the gentleman who quit his job recently, and with the funding of the Occupy Wall Street and Occupy everything. So more specifically, I'm curious exactly how everything is funded. There was mention from Chris, I believe, here in Pokey, that people are donating their own money, but I'm curious, there has to be more than just individuals donating, so I'm just curious on the funding and how that breaks down.
That's primarily not actually true. It is almost entirely individuals' donations. The average donation as of 2 weeks ago, more or less, that the financial group reported back was $48. And we were receiving several $1,000s a day, $5,000 to $8,000 at that point.
And it's coming through the internet as well?
Yeah, primarily. And then we're getting cash donations on site also.
So there are no major groups right now, per se, funding the movement?
No, and I think there's a lot of reluctance towards that. If folks are trying to make more major contributions, they're asked to make maybe more of a solid contribution of equipment or something. But as I understand it, a representative, well, not a representative, a person involved in the movement just went to a large philanthropist conference to some degree in Philadelphia and stood up in front of these people who decide to give money to people and said, please don't give us money because that's not what we need. We need support. So.
Great. Thanks so much for your call, Weston. I'm going to ask a question that I know you've probably been asked before or at least read about. How do you distinguish your, now I'm not going to say the movement, but some of your grievances from those of Tea Party members? Kay?
Well, I think there is some agreement there because initially, I think some of the Tea Party members had some complaints that were similar to what ours are. But I think that movement kind of got taken over by people with a lot of money, and I think that's maybe why we were somewhat reticent to take in big donations. So, but I think all Americans, I think 99% of Americans, what do we want? We want to be able to develop our own unique talents to support ourselves, to support our families, to support our communities. That's what we want. And we want a system that helps us do that instead of something that keeps getting the richer richer.
Have any of you seen any Tea Party members come and join the Occupy movement?
In Boise, we've had several Tea Party folks come and join us, and I really do think that I mean, obviously I can't speak for the Tea Party itself, but the folks in that movement, as far as I've been able to see, are genuinely concerned about greed and corruption, and so we share that concern.
Let's take a call from Charlene in Mountain Home. Charlene, thanks so much for waiting.
Hi, how are you all doing tonight?
Good, thanks.
I am actually protesting against the protesters. I think that they've got themselves very confused. They keep talking about a dictatorship. They keep talking about wanting to a different government. They should be protesting. The government allowed a lot of this stuff in the first place. They did the bailouts. The government took our taxes. The government's just as corrupt. Yet they're running with the government against working people. And the guy who just quit his job. Why would you quit your job when you really should have kept your job? You could protest on the weekends like I'm going to do this weekend against you.
And how are you going to do your protest, Charlene?
Awesome. I've got some stuff I've written that I'm going to pass out.
Okay. All right. And let's put you on hold and get an answer. Hold on.
So I think her question was directed at Anthony, but I would just like to respond. Charlene, you're saying why aren't we protesting the government? I think one of the things that many of us are concerned about is the fact that we don't feel that this so-called representative government, in fact, does that in any real way. So I would actually encourage you to stop by a General Assembly and to talk to some folks if you have time, because I think you might find yourself surprised.
And Anthony, to her question about why quit your job?
Why would I quit my job?
Right.
I mean, I'll just start by saying you don't know me, and therefore, how can you really have a position of whether or not I should quit my job? And what I'll say in response to it is that I feel more fulfilled by what I'm doing today and building a popular movement than I did working in front of a computer screen as a graphic designer, which I liked a lot, but this is fulfilling. This is my life.
Let's take a call. Thank you, by the way, Charlene, for calling very much.
Can I respond?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I'd like to say, you know, I work, and what I hear them saying is they want me to give half of what I make to make everybody even to them, especially the one who quit his job. You know, half of what I make, I have to put out there to make everybody even with this economy. In other words, with the type of money they want to earn or they want to receive. And I work really, really hard. I've worked hard all my life. I am a truck driver. I help feed these people of this country. The sacrifices that I have to make as a truck driver, you can't even imagine.
Okay, good point. Let's get a response. Yeah, who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
I'll take Christopher first in Pocatello.
Yeah, so in response to that, you know, I really do think that you might be a little confused at how the government interacts within the general economic distribution as a whole. When you have bills that are continually being passed by members that are talking about defunding public education, that talk about getting rid of social services, that also target the very people who can't afford to go out there and maybe take a day off to protest. Like, when you talk about making that segment of the population weaker, making them less than the other group of the segment of the population, you're basically driving a wedge between community groups. And I don't think that that is something that anyone here wants. And furthermore, you talk about how you don't want to give everything. That's fine. You don't have to give anything to the Occupy movement. Some people will, some people won't. That's inherent within their own decision. I think, though, that when you have representatives, like you do in the state of Idaho, who get rid of all the types of different benefits which you could possibly utilize, you as a public citizen could utilize, then your representatives are the ones who are taking their anger out on you, and you are giving them that power.
Reggie in Moscow?
Yeah, it sounds like the caller's basic concern is that she seems to be accusing Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement of basically wanting some sort of wealth redistribution, in the sense that she's going to give half of her income to people that aren't working or something to that effect. And from my perspective, that's certainly not what I want. I think that people like the caller are folks that have been downtrodden and have seen their wages stagnated over the past 30 years. And when we talk about wealth redistribution, I think that the wealth redistribution has been going on for 30 years. It's been redistributed to the top 1%. And I think what most of the Occupy folks are asking for is just basic, simple economic fairness.
So, as a journalist, when I read the articles, I see criticism of the movement from people who say, get a job. And then I also have seen criticism of the movement from people who say it's all middle-class kids who can afford to take off some time to do this. How would you respond to the
As
latter?
a target of both of those, I would say that my personal interests have been and continue to be building a life that doesn't depend on money. So utilizing resources, and that's not to say public resources.
So do you barter something in exchange then?
I can do that. I also am not afraid to live off of the incredible waste that our system produces as a result of using capital to measure the worth of everything. So let's acknowledge that grocery stores and restaurants throw away their bulk produce because if they gave it away, it wouldn't be worth as much money in the store. There's an argument that a lot of owners will say, well, if people get it for free, they'll never buy it, and I don't think that's true.
So you would then you would eat some of the produce that's been thrown away?
Absolutely.
Okay. What do you see now with the weather changing, that the locus of this movement will be moving towards the west coast? I mean, towards
Are
Oakland?
you asking me?
Yeah, or no? Well, because you're in New York, yeah, sure.
I don't think that. What I would hope is that folks will take it upon themselves to move their occupations either into safe spaces outside where they're heating themselves, or at least have appropriate weather-based tents like Idaho, like Boise's about to erect. Also, we're occupying everything, and so while I think there's a lot of power of taking a public park, I think there's also a lot of power of taking potentially a foreclosed upon building that a bank has taken over and now has boarded up. And I think that that's not out of the question.
And how do you differentiate yourself from other movements? Because there's been many movements through time, you know, and some sociologists look and say it's somewhat cyclical, actually. So how do you feel you're different? Kay?
Yeah,
I'll ask you because you've had some time to look at other movements as well.
Right, that's right. I think it's the timing. I think it's the imperative. You know, through the last 20 years, as we've had deregulation, we've seen this massive movement of the money going upwards. And the disparity is so great. And what we're seeing is that this isn't sustainable, you know. So what we have to do is look at a way we can make an economy that is sustainable. And that's looking at all of the things that we buy, and not only how are they going to be made this time, but how are they going to be taken apart and made into new products next time, so that we're not taking all the resources out of the earth continuously. We are on a finite earth, and as a group, we live here. And so it's timing, it's imperative. We've got to change the way we're operating. And I think I think we can do that. And I don't think it's even going to be that hard. And I do think our standard of living doesn't have to be worse. It will be a lot different. We have to change the way we do things. And part of that change is to make the society work for the people, not for just the rich.
So I would respond to that specific question by saying that I don't know that we are different from other movements. I would actually say, I believe it was Dr. King who said that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And I would look back at every movement that has come before us and see it as a move against injustice, a movement towards a more just world, right? So, you know, that goes, the movement in the 60s for civil rights and against the Vietnam War. And if you go back before that, the movement in the 30s for union organization and for better pay and for recognition of the rights of workers, and the movement before that in the 1860s to abolish slavery, and movements before that. I really genuinely don't think that there's really a difference. I think what we're seeing is human beings acting, showing that they want to be free human beings.
I'm curious to know why now, because the bailouts happened a while ago. What is prompting this? Is it that liberal people who supported President Obama are just disappointed in his performance and realize that, in their view, a change of presidency doesn't mean much, and so that's why we're seeing this? Why is it happening now when some of the issues you're talking about have been happening for years?
I would say that that's a prime factor that weighs in here. People felt, Obama raised himself up on this platform of hope and change, and folks were, boy, I hope there's change, and I don't think there has been. I think that this is just a new face to front for the same direction that the government and our country has been moving towards for a long time.
Marcia, this is Kay.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on that too, and it's there is some disappointment maybe with Obama, but the huge disappointment is with Congress. It's doing nothing. It is just stalemated, and it doesn't matter whether it's Republicans or Democrats. It's not working, and I think that's the huge failure. But I would also say there's been a failure of the Supreme Court, that it could rule that money is the equivalent of free speech, that it could rule that a corporation is a person. I'm sorry, I don't buy that, and I don't think most of Americans buy that either.
Totally agreed with Kay.
Let me ask you as we wrap up, if we were to do this program, say, a year from now, looking back, where would you be happy being a year from now with the movement? What would make you content? Reggie?
I think that in a year from now, if this movement is still going strong, and if the voice is still being heard, and if the media is still covering the Occupy movement, then that would be great. And I think that, on the other hand, if a year from now people are getting a better understanding of what Occupy stands for, and essentially if the movement grows and becomes bigger, then I think that that's what success would look like a year from now for the Occupy movement.
And Chris, what about you? A year from now, what would make you happy to see?
I'm already happy to see like a bunch of people getting together who have different beliefs, who are discussing the issues that are at hand. My hope for a year from now is that it continues, that people can continue getting together and have a productive discourse about different issues that are around, and to see more and more people get engaged, looking at their politicians, understanding how money influences their politicians, understanding how Supreme Court cases like Citizens United influence different politics around the entire United States, and how it gives corporations a huge advantage over an individual. If people can learn to understand that in a year, and I'm not saying that that will happen, I'm just saying that if they can, then I think that we have a good chance to make a great dialogue get even more amazing.
And Kay?
Oh, I agree absolutely with Chris. I think that we've already seen a change, as was mentioned earlier. We've seen a change in what the media is presenting. They're actually presenting real facts and figures. We've seen a difference in what people are talking about, the words that are being used, and I think it's going to be greater. And so, to me, if we can get Americans talking to each other and listening to each other, that would be a huge start. We're pretty tired of all this hate-mongering and all this yelling and screaming on the media, and we want to have communities that we feel good about living in and we can participate in.
Siobhan?
Well done, Kay. I would totally agree with that, and I would say I hope a year from now that our skills at listening to each other and at articulating our concerns and the size and strength of our community has grown.
And I'll ask you kind of a double-ended question of that. First, what you hope for Occupy Wall Street in New York, where you are living now. What would you like to see?
Speculating a year out is very difficult. I've worked hard. in experience of being there since the 17th, things have changed so drastically that the vision that I host today is so much stronger than the vision and hopes that I had when I showed up on the 17th, that I actually work hard not to speculate where
So
we're
staying
going.
in the present moment.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that the things we do today are changing tomorrow, so that tomorrow we can start to conceive what to do next.
Well, let me ask you the other part of that question, and that is that you're here in Boise and you're assisting Occupy Boise with understanding some of the things that have happened with Occupy Wall Street. From your perspective, looking forward, and we won't set a year on it, but just looking forward, what would you like to see Occupy Boise or the movement in Idaho achieve?
Some suggestions, I suppose, that I would say is getting a really solid grasp on the concepts of horizontal structure. And understanding the concepts of empowerment and just communal responsibilities, collectivism. The bigger underlying themes of everything that's happening in Wall Street are defined in these. Communities of accountability and communities of empowerment are very key phrases, which I think can be built towards through some understanding and education, and acknowledging that in our society we aren't really handed these tools, and so there's a lot to unlearn in order to clear space to learn what we need. And so if we all come to the table with open minds and open hearts, we can share some of these things and build into the world we want to see.
Well, thank you for coming to this table and sharing your thoughts, and thank you for all the folks at other tables, Reggie Holmquist in Moscow, Idaho, Kay Finley and Christopher Cook in Pocatello, Siobhan Hasse and Anthony here in Boise. We've been talking about the Occupy movement in Idaho. If you'd like to watch the main program, please go to our website. For a dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin.